She wasn't asking for the moon, only for a pillow to ease the ache in her lower back. Instead, a pregnant astrophysicist, returning home from a lecture that had reshaped humanity's understanding of the cosmos, found herself belittled, denied common courtesy, and then brutally slapped by the very flight attendant tasked with her safety. But this flight attendant, her face a mask of bitter authority, had no idea who she had just assaulted. This wasn't just another passenger, and this wasn't merely a transatlantic flight. Behind the gentle voice and the weary grace was a mind that calculated the movements of galaxies. One phone call, a call she never wanted to make, would trigger a chain reaction that would tear through the highest echelons of corporate power, grounding an entire fleet and exposing a rot that had festered for years. Because justice, much like gravity, doesn't need an invitation to exert its force. It was already buckled into seat 2B. At 3:45 p.m., Dr. Amelia Hayes stood at the priority boarding lane for Apex Air Flight 771 at London Heathrow, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her 6-month pregnancy, the other clutching a worn leather satchel containing her life's work. Her boarding pass, a crisp white rectangle, clearly designated her seat in the Polaris first-class cabin. Yet the gate agent, a man with a harried expression, frowned at his screen. "I'm sorry, Dr. Hayes," he said, his tone clipped. "There's a security flag on your reservation. It seems there's a discrepancy with the payment method." Amelia blinked, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. "That's impossible. My university's travel department booked this weeks ago. I have the confirmation email right here." "You'll need to step aside, ma'am. We have to board the other passengers." The word ma'am was a dismissal, a verbal shove to the periphery. Amelia's jaw tightened, but she moved as requested, her heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. "It's just a computer error," she told herself. She was a woman who navigated quantum mechanics before breakfast. She could certainly handle a ticketing glitch. That's when she first saw her. Brenda Croft. Late 50s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe, immaculate chignon. Her Apex Air uniform so sharply pressed it could have been forged from steel. Her name badge gleamed under the terminal lights, identifying her as the flight's purser. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept over Amelia, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on her swollen belly and the simple, comfortable dress she wore. It was a look Amelia knew well. An appraisal, a judgment, a swift and silent categorization. "Are you the one holding up my boarding process?" Brenda asked, her voice devoid of any warmth. Amelia squared her shoulders. "There appears to be a system error with my ticket." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "And you're ticketed for Polaris first?" The question was layered with disbelief. "That's correct. Seat 2B. A flicker of something, disdain perhaps, crossed Brenda's face before being replaced by a thin, professional smile that didn't touch her eyes. How fascinating. She turned to the flustered gate agent. "Check the name again, and cross-reference the credit card authorization. We can't have unverified individuals in the premium cabins." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Unverified. As if she were a stowaway. Amelia took a slow, deep breath, forcing the scientific, rational part of her brain to take control. Her lecture at Oxford had been a triumph, her paper on stellar nucleosynthesis set to be published in the world's most prestigious journal. She was flying home to her husband, to the life they were building. She would not be undone by this petty gatekeeper. As the agent fumbled with his keyboard, Amelia leaned forward. "Could you please tell me what the flag says specifically?" "It says, payment authorization mismatch," the agent mumbled, now refusing to meet her gaze. That makes no sense. I have the corporate card statement on my phone. Brenda folded her arms, a posture of absolute authority. Do you fly Apex often, Dr. Hayes? Amelia didn't owe this woman her travel history. She turned back to the agent. Is there a supervisor I can speak with? At that moment, a younger flight attendant with kind eyes and a nervous smile approached. Her name tag read, Sarah. Excuse me, Ms. Croft. Captain Miller just radioed. The new payment software has been flagging university and corporate bookings all morning. He said to manually override and board any affected Polaris passengers immediately. Brenda's head snapped towards the young woman. I will follow standard procedure. Thank you, Sarah. The passenger will wait until the system clears her. Sarah flinched but held her ground. But the captain's directive was to prevent further delays. I am the purser on this flight, Brenda said, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. My authority in the cabin is final. Go and complete your pre-flight checks. Sarah looked at Amelia, her expression a mixture of apology and helplessness, before retreating. Brenda stared down the gate agent until he finally received a new message on his screen. His shoulders slumped in relief. It's cleared. The system just refreshed. He handed the boarding pass back to Amelia without a word. Brenda gave a tight, victorious smile. See? Procedure works. Amelia said nothing. She simply took her pass and walked towards the jet bridge, the encounter leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. As she stepped onto the aircraft, she was greeted by the serene, climate-controlled air of the first-class cabin, a world of muted greys, brushed steel, and the faint scent of lavender. She found her seat, a spacious pod with its own privacy screen, and sank into the plush upholstery, her body sighing in relief. The worst, she thought, was surely over. She was catastrophically wrong. From the aisle, the sharp, rhythmic click of heels announced an approaching presence. Amelia looked up to see Brenda standing over her, arms crossed, that same cold smile plastered on her face. So, you made it on board, she stated, as if it were a surprising development. I did, Amelia replied, her voice even. Well then, Brenda said, her gaze sweeping over Amelia's small carry-on and the satchel at her feet. Let's ensure your baggage is stowed correctly. Everything must be in the overhead compartment for takeoff. No exceptions. Amelia started to explain that her satchel contained sensitive research materials and a laptop she needed to work on, but she stopped. There was something in Brenda's tone that went beyond procedure. It was personal. The polite hostility from the gate had morphed into unconcealed contempt, and in that moment, Amelia understood. This wasn't about a payment flag or baggage rules. This was about her, about the simple, unchangeable fact of her presence in this seat, in this cabin. As the heavy cabin door sealed shut with a pneumatic hiss, a deep, primal sense of unease settled in Amelia's gut. This 7-hour flight was not going to be a peaceful journey home. It was going to be a battle of wills, fought at 35,000 feet, and she was already at a disadvantage. Amelia settled into her seat, the premium leather cool against her skin. The pod was designed for luxury, but the persistent ache in her lower back made true comfort elusive. The aircraft was still at the gate, the cabin filled with the low murmur of passengers settling in. A wave of nausea, a familiar but unwelcome companion in her pregnancy, rolled through her. She needed to recline her seat just slightly and find a better position. She reached up and pressed the call button. Brenda appeared with an unnerving swiftness, as if she had been waiting for the summons. Yes? Amelia offered a polite, tired smile. Could I please have a pillow for my back? I'm having some discomfort. And a bottle of water, if it's not too much trouble. I'm feeling a bit dehydrated. Brenda's smile was a brittle thing. Full pre-departure beverage service will commence once we reach cruising altitude, as per company policy. We don't distribute amenities until after takeoff. I understand, Amelia said gently. But I'm pregnant, and the doctor recommended I stay very well hydrated. Just a small bottle of water would make a significant difference. Brenda's eyes flickered down to Amelia's abdomen and then back up, her expression hardening. We must adhere to our service timeline for the benefit of all passengers. You'll be served with everyone else. Without another word, she turned on her heel and vanished into the galley. Amelia leaned her head back, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. She had debated rogue black holes, calculated the gravitational pull of dark matter, and stood before skeptical panels of the world's greatest minds. This was different. This wasn't an intellectual challenge. It was a denial of basic humanity. Here, she wasn't Dr. Hayes, the celebrated astrophysicist. She was simply an inconvenience. The plane began its slow pushback from the gate. The gentle vibration of the engines was a familiar hum. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, passed by and gave Amelia a quick, sympathetic glance, but she was busy with her cabin checks and didn't stop. Amelia reached down to fasten her seatbelt, but the standard strap cut awkwardly and tightly across the top of her belly. No matter how she adjusted it, it applied an uncomfortable pressure. She knew from her doctor that the belt should be worn low, across the hips and under the baby bump. This one wouldn't reach. She pressed the call button again. Brenda reappeared, her patience visibly frayed. "What is it now?" Amelia kept her voice calm and steady. "I'm sorry to bother you again, but this seatbelt is positioned incorrectly for a pregnancy. Could I please have a seatbelt extender? It would allow me to secure it safely below my abdomen." Brenda frowned, looking down at the fastened belt. "You appear to be perfectly secure. It's not about being secure. It's about the safety of the fetus. The pressure is directly on my uterus. The FAA and most major airlines recommend extenders for expectant mothers in their second and third trimesters." Brenda's lips thinned into a razor-sharp line. "Extenders are for passengers of size who are physically unable to buckle the standard belt. They are not comfort accessories." Amelia stared at her, stunned by the deliberate misinterpretation. "I am not asking for a comfort accessory. I am asking for a standard safety device for my unborn child." "I see," Brenda said, her voice now laced with undisguised venom. "You people always have a reason you need special treatment, don't you?" The words landed like stones in the quiet cabin. "You people." There it was, raw and undisguised. The prejudice she had sensed at the gate was now laid bare. Amelia felt a cold fury rise within her, but her scientific training took over. De-escalate. Present facts. Remove emotion. "I am asking for an accommodation that is standard industry practice," she said, her voice level and precise. "It is a matter of safety, not preference." Brenda let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you think you know all about safety. What did you say you were? A doctor?" "I'm an astrophysicist, but that's irrelevant. This is about established airline safety protocols for pregnant passengers." "An astrophysicist," Brenda repeated, drawing the word out as if it were absurd. "That's lovely, dear. My brother-in-law reads horoscopes. We all have our little hobbies. But on this aircraft, I am the one trained in safety. I have been flying for 30 years. I don't need a lecture on seatbelts from a passenger." The plane jolted as it made a sharp turn onto the taxiway. Amelia swallowed hard, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The belt dug in, and the baby gave a small, protesting kick. Brenda leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If you wish to file a complaint with our corporate office after we land, you are more than welcome to. Until then, you will remain seated and secured as you are." Amelia's voice was equally quiet, but it held a core of unyielding steel. "Then I must insist you inform the captain that a passenger is not safely secured for takeoff. I will not fly like this." Brenda straightened up, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Are you refusing to comply with the instructions of a flight crew member during active taxi? I am asserting my right to be transported safely, as per your own regulations," Amelia replied. "If you are unwilling to provide the necessary equipment, then I must escalate the matter to your superior." For a long, tense moment, Brenda just stood there, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The mask of professionalism had completely disintegrated, revealing the raw animosity beneath. She leaned in one last time, her face inches from Amelia's. "You think your fancy title and your first-class ticket make you important. On this plane, I am in charge, not you." Without waiting for a reply, she spun around and marched back towards the galley. Amelia exhaled a shaky breath, her hand gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles were white. The baby kicked again, harder this time. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on the rhythmic breathing techniques from her prenatal class. Across the aisle, a young man in seat 2D, wearing headphones around his neck, caught her eye. He had a look of concern on his face, as if he wanted to intervene but didn't know how. He gave her a small, hesitant nod of support. The overhead chime binged, signaling the final cabin check before takeoff. Amelia could see the lights of the runway ahead. The engines began to whine, building power. The seatbelt felt like a vice. Her baby, her precious, vulnerable child, was directly in the line of pressure. Her protective instincts, primal and powerful, overrode everything else. This was no longer about dignity or respect. It was about survival. The roar of the engines intensified, a deafening promise of imminent departure. The pressure of the seatbelt across Amelia's belly was now unbearable, a constant, sharp line of tension. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that this was dangerous. Her baby shifted, a frantic, unhappy flutter that felt different from the gentle kicks she was used to. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through her composure. She pressed the call button again, her thumb jabbing it with a desperate finality. Brenda was there in an instant, her face a thunderous mask. "I have told you," she snapped, her voice cutting through the engine noise, "that we are taking off. You are belted. The matter is closed." Amelia kept her voice low, but it was imbued with the unshakable certainty of a scientific principle. You're actively endangering a pregnant passenger and her child. Your refusal to provide a standard piece of safety equipment is a gross violation of your duty of care. I am asking you one final time. Provide a seatbelt extender or call the captain and halt this takeoff. Brenda's face flushed a deep, mottled red. You are refusing a direct order from the crew. That is a federal offense. I can have you arrested and put on a no-fly list the moment we land. I am not refusing, Amelia said, her voice rising slightly, clear and articulate. I am insisting on safe passage. If you will not secure me properly, then I have no choice but to stand up until you do. And with that, summoning every ounce of her remaining strength, she unbuckled the offending belt. Using the armrests, she slowly, deliberately, pushed herself to her feet. Her movement was not aggressive. It was the careful, measured action of a woman trying to protect her body. But in Brenda's eyes, it was the ultimate act of defiance. A collective gasp swept through the first-class cabin. "What do you think you're doing?" Brenda hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "I am protecting my child," Amelia said simply, her hand resting on the seat in front of her for balance. "That is it," Brenda snarled, taking a step closer. "Sit down now, or I will have you restrained." Amelia didn't flinch. She met the older woman's furious gaze with a calm that seemed to infuriate her even more. "No, I am done being dismissed. I am done being treated like I am less than human." Brenda's control finally, completely, shattered. Her hand shot out, moving with a speed that defied her age. The sound it made was not a slap, but a crack, sharp, ugly, and absolute, that echoed through the stunned silence of the cabin. Amelia stumbled backward, collapsing into her seat, more from shock than from the force of the blow. Her cheek exploded with a hot, stinging pain. Her vision swam, the plush, serene cabin blurring into a kaleidoscope of grey and blue. For an eternal second, the world stopped. The roar of the engines, the hum of the ventilation, the very air itself seemed to hold its breath. Brenda stood frozen, her hand still raised, her chest heaving. A look of pure, animalistic fury was slowly being replaced by a dawning horror, as if her own body had betrayed her. Amelia slowly raised a trembling hand to her face, her fingertips coming away from skin that was already beginning to swell. In seat 2D, Mark Jennings, a tech journalist for a major online publication, had already been recording. His jaw was slack with disbelief, but his hands were steady. His phone's camera had captured everything. Amelia's calm resolve, Brenda's escalating rage, the violent, indefensible strike. The spell was broken by a voice from the row behind. She was out of line. She stood up during takeoff. That flight attendant was just doing her job. The speaker was a man in an expensive suit, his face flushed with indignation. Mark swiveled in his seat. "Are you kidding me? The woman is pregnant. She asked for a seatbelt extender. I heard the whole thing." "She was being disruptive," the man insisted. "And you shouldn't be filming the crew. That's against the rules." "Assaulting a pregnant woman is against the law," Mark shot back, his voice ringing with conviction. "And I have the evidence right here." Suddenly aware of the phone pointed in her direction, Brenda's face drained of all color. At that moment, Sarah, the junior attendant, came rushing from the galley, her face pale. "What happened? I heard a—" She trailed off, her eyes landing on the bright red mark blooming on Amelia's cheek. Brenda whirled on her. "This passenger became unruly. She stood up during taxi. I had to de-escalate the situation." "That's a lie," Mark said, now standing as well. "She was calm. You were the one escalating. You refused her basic safety requests, you insulted her, and then you hit her." Just then, the plane, which had been accelerating down the runway, began to slow abruptly. The powerful engines throttled back, their roar diminishing to a whine. A heavy, braking force pressed everyone back into their seats. Over the intercom, the captain's voice crackled, sharp and authoritative. "Cabin crew, report to the flight deck. Immediately." Brenda's spine went rigid. She shot a venomous look at Mark, then at Amelia. But her authority was gone, shattered in that single, violent moment. Sarah looked at her superior, then at the weeping woman in seat 2B. "Ms. Croft," she said, her voice shaking but firm, "you should go." Brenda opened her mouth as if to argue, but no words came out. She straightened her uniform by reflex, a pathetic attempt to reclaim her shattered dignity, and walked stiffly toward the cockpit. Amelia sat in her seat, one hand on her stinging cheek, the other pressed against her abdomen. And then she felt it, a sharp, searing cramp that radiated through her lower belly. It was nothing like the aches and pains she'd felt before. This was different. This was wrong. Sarah knelt beside her. "Dr. Hayes, are you all right?" Amelia shook her head, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path through the angry red on her skin. "I'm cramping," she whispered, her voice choked with a new, more profound terror. It's a bad one." Sarah's eyes widened. She stood up instantly. "The captain is already turning us back to the gate. He's calling for medics to meet us." The aircraft completed its slow, shameful turn off the runway. The flight to New York was over before it had even begun. But for Amelia, the journey was just starting. It was no longer about getting home. It was about saving her child. The aircraft docked at the gate with a gentle bump that felt like a seismic event in the tense, silent cabin. Amelia sat rigidly in her seat, breathing through another wave of cramping. The pain was sharp and rhythmic, a terrifying drumbeat of premature labor. Sarah had brought her a blanket and a bottle of water, her face a portrait of deep concern. "How are you feeling?" Sarah whispered, kneeling beside her again. Amelia shook her head, unable to speak past the fear constricting her throat. The baby hadn't moved since the first sharp cramp. That stillness was a silent scream that was louder than any noise on the plane. The captain's voice came over the intercom, clipped and devoid of emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Due to a serious security incident on board, we have returned to the gate. Please remain in your seats. Port Authority officers will be boarding the aircraft." The words, "security incident," sent a fresh ripple of speculation through the cabin. Passengers craned their necks, their gazes shifting between Amelia, the empty aisle where Brenda had stood, and the closed cockpit door. The man in the suit who had defended Brenda now sat silently, staring out the window, refusing to make eye contact. Mark, the journalist, leaned across the aisle. "I've already backed up the video to the cloud," he said quietly to Amelia. "They can't make me delete it. Whatever you need, just say the word." Amelia managed a weak, grateful nod. Her world had narrowed to the sensations in her own body, the fire on her cheek, the clenching in her womb, the terrifying silence where there should have been movement. When the cabin door opened, 2 uniformed Port Authority officers stepped on board, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere from one of tension to one of official crisis. A senior female officer spoke quietly with the captain, then walked directly to Amelia's seat. "Dr. Hayes?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Amelia nodded. "We're here to escort you off the plane. Paramedics are waiting for you on the jet bridge." With Sarah's help, Amelia slowly got to her feet, wincing as another cramp seized her. As she walked toward the door, the other first-class passengers averted their eyes, a collective shame filling the space. The journey down the jet bridge was a blur of sterile lighting and concerned faces. 2 EMTs were waiting with a gurney, but Amelia insisted she could walk. "I just need to get to a hospital," she murmured, her hand protectively cradling her stomach. "Of course, ma'am," one of the medics said. "But first, we need to get you to a quiet place for an initial assessment. The station manager has cleared out the Apex Polaris lounge for you. It's the most secure location." Amelia's heart sank. The lounge, the place where this whole nightmare had begun. But she was too weak, too frightened to argue. They led her through a series of service corridors, away from the prying eyes of the main terminal, and back to the frosted glass doors of the exclusive lounge. The doors slid open to reveal the same hushed, luxurious space. The same soft jazz was playing, but standing near the polished marble bar was a man in a sharply tailored suit, his face etched with anxiety. He was the Heathrow station manager, a man named Robert Finch. He saw the officers, he saw Amelia's face, and his professional composure crumbled. "Dr. Hayes," he breathed, rushing forward. "My God, what happened?" Before Amelia could form a response, Sarah, who had followed them, spoke up. There was an incident. She was assaulted by the purser, Brenda Croft. Finch went pale. Assaulted? On my flight? He looked from Amelia's bruised cheek to the hand clutching her abdomen. And I'm cramping, Amelia managed to say. I think I might be in labor. The station manager looked as though he'd been struck himself. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling slightly as he scrolled through his contacts. He found the number he was looking for and pressed it to his ear. Amelia could hear the frantic, high-pitched tone of his voice as he spoke. Julian, you need to answer your phone. It's Robert at Heathrow. There's been a code red incident on Flight 771. It's Amelia. She's been assaulted by a crew member. No, she's conscious. But she needs medical attention. Yes, she's cramping. Julian, listen to me. The purser who assaulted her, it was Brenda. It was your mother. Amelia's head snapped up. His mother. Robert Finch was looking directly at her, his face a mask of profound apology and terror. Yes, Julian, on your plane, your wife, and your mother. Sarah stood beside Amelia, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were bone white. Amelia turned to her, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. The protection, the years of unchecked behavior. She's been a problem for a long time, hasn't she? Amelia whispered. Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Everyone knew. Management always looked the other way. Nobody wanted to be the one to discipline the CEO's mother. I'm so sorry. I should have done more. Amelia closed her eyes, the pain in her abdomen momentarily forgotten, replaced by the dizzying, horrifying understanding of the situation. The man whose company had just failed her so spectacularly was not some faceless corporate entity. He was her husband, and the woman who had struck her, who had put her unborn child's life in danger, was her mother-in-law. The boardroom on the 50th floor of the Shard was a cathedral of glass and steel, offering a panoramic view of the London skyline. At the head of a massive mahogany table, Julian Croft commanded the room. He was breaking down Apex Air's quarterly earnings with a calm, surgical precision that had made him a legend in the aviation industry before he was 40. Investors, board members, and analysts hung on his every word. A multi-billion-dollar merger was on the line. Then his personal phone, the one reserved for emergencies, vibrated silently on the table beside him. A text from Robert Finch, Heathrow Station Manager. Urgent, code red 731. Amelia assaulted. Medics on site. Assailant is Brenda. Call me now. The world tilted on its axis. The numbers on the projection screen blurred into meaningless symbols. Julian's blood ran cold. He saw the name Brenda, and a familiar, weary anger rose in him. Another one of her scenes, he thought for a fleeting second. Another drama. But then he saw Amelia and assaulted, and the weary anger was consumed by a tidal wave of pure, cold dread. "Excuse me," he said, his voice miraculously steady. He stood, smoothing the front of his bespoke suit. "A critical family emergency requires my immediate attention. You'll have to continue without me." The room rustled with confusion, but no one argued. The authority in Julian's voice was absolute. He walked out of the boardroom and into the private hallway, and the moment the door closed behind him, the facade of the unflappable CEO shattered. He leaned against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The practiced calm was gone, replaced by a volcanic rage and a gut-wrenching guilt. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't call for his car. He dialed the first number in a rapid, pre-programmed sequence of crisis management. "Eleanor," he said, his voice sharp as broken glass. Eleanor Vance, his general counsel, answered on the first ring. "Julian, what's wrong?" Incident on Flight 771 at Heathrow. Brenda Croft assaulted a passenger. The passenger was Amelia. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Oh my God, is she?" "She's with medics. I need Brenda's complete employment file. Now. Every complaint, formal or informal. Every passenger feedback report. Every transfer request from crew who worked with her. I don't care if it was suppressed, buried, or shredded. Find it." "On it," Eleanor said, her voice already businesslike. He disconnected and immediately dialed again. "David," he barked at his head of operations. "Lock down all footage from 771. Gate cameras, jet bridge, onboard security feeds. I want every angle. And run a keyword search through our entire internal database for Brenda Croft's name linked to the words rude, aggressive, racist, complaint, or difficult. I want a full history of her behavior, and I want it an hour ago." "Yes, Mr. Croft." The third call was to his head of PR. "Maria, initiate Protocol Phoenix." A sharp intake of breath. "Julian, that's reserved for a catastrophic failure, a crash." "This is a crash," he interrupted, his voice raw. "It's a crash of culture, of leadership, of my own damn family. Get ahead of it. I want a statement drafted. No excuses, no corporate speak. We take full, unconditional responsibility. We failed. I failed." Finally, with a trembling hand, he dialed the only number that truly mattered. It rang 3 times before she answered, her voice small and weak. "Julian? Amelia? My love, I'm on my way. Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" He could hear her take a shaky breath. "They're taking me to the hospital. I'm having contractions. Julian, she hit me." He closed his eyes, a pain more profound than any business loss piercing his heart. "I know. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have dealt with her years ago." "Why didn't you?" she whispered. The question, not an accusation, but a genuine, painful inquiry. And in that moment, leaning against the cold glass wall, high above London, Julian Croft had no answer. He was the man who could navigate hostile takeovers and international airspace regulations, but he had been unable to manage the corrosive bitterness of his own mother. He had kept her on the payroll, kept her flying, thinking that keeping her at a distance was enough. He had mistaken avoidance for management, and now his wife and his unborn child were paying the price for his failure. As he raced towards the heliport on the roof, his phone buzzed with the first report from Eleanor. "File is almost clean. Too clean. But I'm finding shadows. 3 different junior flight attendants who requested transfers off her routes in the last year, citing personality conflicts. A passenger complaint from 6 months ago about a hostile senior purser on the London route that was closed without action. This was buried, Julian. Deliberately. He stepped into the waiting helicopter, the rotors whipping the London air into a frenzy. He was no longer just the CEO of Apex Air. He was the husband of the woman his airline had victimized, and the son of the woman who had committed the act. The reckoning was coming, and it would begin with his own family. Mark Jennings sat in the sterile, crowded waiting area of the Heathrow departures terminal, his flight to New York indefinitely delayed. His fingers flew across the screen of his phone. He had already uploaded the 1-minute, 22-second video to a secure server. He watched it one more time, the raw audio making his stomach churn. Amelia's calm, reasoned requests, Brenda's sneering condescension, the sickening crack of the slap. He opened his professional social media account, his journalist instincts taking over. He typed quickly, his words precise and damning. On board Apex Air Flight 1 LHR JFK, just witnessed senior purser Brenda Croft physically assault a pregnant black passenger in Polaris First. The passenger repeatedly and calmly requested a seatbelt extender for safety. The purser refused, insulted her, and then struck her across the face. Flight returned to gate. Passenger removed by medics. I have the entire incident on video. Our Apex Air. The world is watching. Now over an Apex assault. Justice for Amelia. He tagged several major news outlets and hit post. The effect was instantaneous and explosive. Within 5 minutes it had 1,000 retweets. Within 15 it had 50,000 views. Within the hour it was the #1 trending topic in the United Kingdom and was rapidly climbing in the United States. The internet did what it does best. It became a global jury. The video was dissected frame by frame. Brenda's sneer became a meme for corporate arrogance. Amelia's calm dignity became a symbol of grace under fire. Then came the other voices. An anonymous account, a Apex insider, posted a reply. I'm a flight attendant for Apex. We have called Brenda Croft the gatekeeper for years. She is notorious for harassing crew and passengers she deems unworthy of first class. Dozens of us have complained. Nothing was ever done because she's the CEO's mother. Yes, you read that right. Julian Croft's mother. That single post was a lit match on a gallon of gasoline. The story transformed from a case of corporate malfeasance into a saga of nepotism and corruption. Guo's mom began trending. News anchors were breaking into regular programming. Apex Air's stock began to plummet in after-hours trading. Inside a private room at Royal London Hospital, Amelia lay on her side, fetal monitors strapped to her belly. The contractions had slowed thanks to the medication, but her doctor WW, the sterile, rhythmic beep of the fetal heart monitor, was the only star left in Amelia's universe. It was a pulsar, a steady, life-affirming beat in the vast, terrifying emptiness that had opened up inside her. Each beep was an anchor, holding her back from drifting into the cold vacuum of panic. The contractions, which had come hard and fast on the jet bridge, had now been slowed by a magnesium drip, but they still arrived like unwelcome gravitational waves, warping the fabric of her reality, reminding her how fragile the vessel of her body was, and how precious its cargo. Her cheek throbbed with a dull, residual fire, a phantom heat from a violence so mundane, so petty, it felt cosmically absurd. She had charted the death of supernovas, and yet she had been undone by the bitter gravity of a single, hateful woman. Julian was a ghost at her bedside. The man who had entered the room was not the CEO of Apex Air, the titan of industry who could move markets with a single sentence. That man had been incinerated on the helicopter ride over. This man was hollowed out, his bespoke suit a mockery of the control he no longer possessed. He held her hand, not with the easy confidence of a husband, but with the desperate, tentative grip of a survivor sifting through wreckage. His eyes were fixed on the dark, ugly bruise blooming on her cheekbone, a brand that marked not just her skin, but his soul. It was the physical manifestation of his failure, a galactic nebula of shame he would have to navigate for the rest of his life. I called her, he said, his voice a raw whisper, scraped clean of its usual authority. Before I left the Shard, I called her, and she didn't answer. I thought she was just being difficult again. Another scene at the gate. I never imagined... He couldn't finish. The words were ash in his mouth. She called me you people, Amelia said, her voice quiet but clear, the words precise as data points. She looked at my belly and said I was asking for special treatment. Julian flinched, a full body recoil as if he'd been struck himself. I know. I've seen the video. I've heard the reports. Eleanor is sending me everything. Every complaint that was ever buried. every crew member who requested a transfer. It's a litany, Amelia. A 20-year history of this. And I let it happen. I kept her on the payroll, gave her the seniority, the transatlantic routes she loved, because it kept her away from me, away from our life. I treated my own mother like a problem to be managed, not a poison to be neutralized. I thought distance was a solution. It's not your fault she is who she is, Julian, Amelia repeated. But the words felt thinner now, less certain. The science of it was simple. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. His inaction had produced this. But it is my fault she was there, he insisted, his voice cracking. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against their joined hands. It is my fault she wore a uniform that gave her power over you. I built a corporate culture that preached respect and inclusion, while knowingly harboring a tyrant in my own family. I was a hypocrite. The worst kind. One who benefits from the lie. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a frantic, insistent vibration. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, Amelia nudged his hand. You have to answer it, Julian. The world doesn't stop. He sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion, and picked it up, activating the speakerphone. Eleanor. Julian. The video has over 100 million views. His general counsel's voice was sharp, strained. The hashtag #CEOsMom is trending globally. The board has invoked the emergency succession clause. They're trying to convene a vote to remove you. Our stock is predicted to open down 40%. This isn't a firestorm. It's an extinction-level event. We need a strategy. We need a statement of containment. Julian looked at Amelia. He saw the IV line snaking into her arm, the monitors tracking the frantic, precious heartbeat of their unborn child, the bruise that was a map of his cowardice. He saw the entire universe in her tired eyes. Containment? Strategy? Those were the words of the man he used to be. There is no containment, Eleanor, he said, and his voice had changed. The broken whisper was gone, replaced by something cold and absolute, the sound of a star collapsing in on itself just before it goes supernova. There is only scorched earth. Tell the board I'll save them the trouble of a vote. I'll be offering my resignation. But first, they're going to do exactly as I say. Julian, what are you going to do? Eleanor's voice was laced with alarm. I'm going to burn it all down, he said. He looked at Amelia, a silent question in his eyes. Tell operations to issue a global grounding order, effective immediately. Every single Apex aircraft, from the A380s to the regional jets, put them on the ground. Now. There was a stunned silence on the line. Julian, that's insane. That's 900 planes, 70,000 employees. That will cost billions. Billions. It will bankrupt us. The cost of doing business as we have been is my wife lying in a hospital bed, about to give birth 2 months early, he countered, his voice ringing with a chilling finality. Tell them the fleet doesn't fly again until I say so. And Eleanor, prepare a press conference at the hospital. I'm not hiding in a boardroom. I'm going to stand before the world, and I'm going to confess. He disconnected the call, dropping the phone onto the bed. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. He had just detonated his life's work. He felt nothing but a profound, terrifying peace. In the windowless interrogation room at Heathrow, Brenda Croft was building her fortress of justification, brick by verbal brick. She was belligerent, she insisted to the 2 detectives, her voice retaining the last vestiges of its cabin crew authority. She was creating a safety hazard, refusing to comply. I have 30 years of exemplary service. 30 years. I was de-escalating. My hand merely slipped, as I was guiding her back to her seat. It was an unfortunate accident. One of the detectives, a stoic man named Singh, slid a tablet across the metal table without a word. He pressed play. Brenda watched, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion, and then to a slack-jawed horror. It wasn't the way she remembered it. In her memory, she was the calm professional, and Amelia was the hysterical passenger. But the video showed the opposite. It showed Amelia's poise, her steady, reasonable voice. And it showed Brenda. It showed a stranger. A woman with a face contorted by a lifetime of curdled resentments, her voice a venomous hiss. "You people!" The sound of the slap was a physical thing, a crack that seemed to break the air in the small room all over again. That's not right," she stammered, her fortress crumbling. "They've manipulated it. The angle, the sound." "We have corroborating statements from 6 passengers, Miss Croft," Singh said, his voice devoid of inflection, "including a tech journalist who is prepared to testify under oath. We also have a statement from flight attendant Sarah Jenkins. They all describe the same sequence of events. They all describe an unprovoked assault." Brenda's world was tilting, the floor falling away. The narrative she had so carefully constructed, not just for this incident, but for her entire career, was dissolving. She had always been the guardian of standards, the one who protected the sanctity of the premium cabin from those who didn't belong. She wasn't a bully. She was an enforcer. She wasn't prejudiced. She was discerning. "She was arrogant," Brenda whispered, a last, desperate defense. "Walking on board with her fancy title, looking down on me, on all of us." The second detective, a woman with tired, knowing eyes, leaned forward. "The passenger in seat 2B, the woman you assaulted, is Dr. Amelia Hayes. She's an astrophysicist, a brilliant one by all accounts. She is also Miss Croft, your son's wife, your daughter-in-law." The words didn't land like a slap. They landed like a verdict from a silent, unforgiving God. Brenda's mind went blank. The room, the detectives, the damning video. It all faded into a roaring, white noise. Julian. Amelia. His wife. The woman he had brought home for Christmas. The quiet, intelligent woman Brenda had dismissed as a phase. Another one of Julian's projects. The woman who was carrying her grandchild. The full, catastrophic weight of her actions crushed her. This was not about losing her job, or her reputation, or her freedom. This was about the final, irrevocable severing of the only thing that gave her life meaning, her connection to her son. She had not just assaulted a passenger. She had waged war on Julian's future. She had tried to extinguish a star in her own family's constellation. She slumped back in her chair, the fight, the bitterness, the rage draining out of her like blood from a mortal wound, leaving behind an emptiness so vast and cold it felt like deep space. The next morning, Julian stood at a podium in the hospital's media room. He had not slept. He had not changed his suit. He looked like a man who had walked through fire. He did not read from a statement. He looked directly into the forest of cameras, his gaze raw and unflinching. "My name is Julian Croft," he began, his voice hoarse but steady. "And I am a failure. I failed as a CEO, I failed as a son, and I failed as a husband. Yesterday, my company, a company built on a promise of safety and respect, profoundly violated that promise. My wife, Dr. Amelia Hayes, was demeaned, denied basic safety equipment, and physically assaulted by a member of my crew. That crew member was my mother." A shockwave of murmurs and shutter clicks rippled through the room. "This was not an isolated incident," he continued, his voice gaining strength. This was the predictable, tragic result of a cancer I allowed to metastasize within my own company and my own family. For years I enabled my mother's behavior. I made excuses. I transferred complaining staff. I buried reports. I chose the path of least resistance, because it was easier than confronting the ugliness in my own bloodline. My cowardice has a cost, and that cost is being paid by my wife and my unborn child, who are fighting for their health in a room upstairs. He took a breath, his jaw tight. Effective immediately, my mother's employment is terminated. Apex Air will cooperate fully with her prosecution, and I will be the first witness for the Crown. Effective immediately, I am tendering my resignation as CEO. But my last act will be this. The entire Apex fleet will remain grounded. Not for a day or a week, but until a new, independent oversight committee, chosen by our pilots and flight attendants unions, can certify that every single one of our procedures has been rebuilt from the ground up to protect passengers, not employees with connections. We will not fly again until we have earned the right. He held up a hand to quell the rising clamor. But that is just business. This is personal. In the hospital last night, my wife and I decided that this horrific event must be transformed into a force for creation. Therefore, I am personally endowing a new foundation with $100 million. It will be called the Hayes Foundation. Its sole purpose will be to shatter the barriers that women like my wife face every day. It will fund scholarships, mentorships, and grants for women of color in STEM, in aviation, in any field where their brilliance is questioned and their presence is challenged. The application will have one question. Tell us what star you are chasing. He stepped back. My wife is the strongest person I know. She studies the fundamental forces of the universe. Yesterday, she was reminded that the most dangerous forces are often the most intimate: hatred, prejudice, and indifference. My company was indifferent. I was indifferent. We are indifferent no longer. There will be no questions. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned silence and the first seismic tremors of a revolution he had just ignited. 3 months later, Amelia sat in the soft yellow light of the nursery, the constellations on the ceiling swirling above her. In her arms, Orion Hayescroft slept, his tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm more comforting than any pulsar. He had arrived 5 weeks early, after a terrifying week of uncertainty. A small, fierce fighter who had clawed his way into the world. The physical bruise on her cheek was a distant memory, but an invisible one remained. A subtle change in the way she moved through the world, a new awareness of its hidden gravities. Julian came in and knelt beside her chair, his hand gently stroking Orion's downy hair. He was no longer a CEO, he was just a man, a father, a husband rebuilding a universe he had almost allowed to collapse. He had testified against his mother in a trial that had captivated the world. Brenda, a shrunken, pathetic figure, had been found guilty and sentenced to a year of probation, intensive therapy, and 500 hours of community service at a women's shelter. A sentence of cruel, poetic justice. He hadn't spoken to her since. He had sent one letter, which was returned unopened. The severing was complete. Apex Air was flying again, under a new CEO and the watchful eye of the union-led committee. Sarah Jenkins now headed their new in-flight advocacy program, a position created to give crew a direct and protected line to report misconduct. Mark Jennings's video was the first thing all new hires watched. It was a brutal, necessary lesson. The first Hayes Foundation board meeting is tomorrow, Julian said softly. I have the final list of candidates for the inaugural scholarship. He handed her a tablet. Amelia scrolled through the names, the faces, the stories. A young woman from a Nigerian village who had taught herself calculus and dreamed of designing rockets. A girl from the favelas of Rio who wanted to be a marine biologist. A software prodigy from Detroit. Each one a universe of potential. "She's the one," Amelia said, pointing to a girl from East London whose essay began, "Some people look up at the stars and feel small. I look up and feel seen." Amelia smiled, a true, deep smile that finally, fully reached her eyes. She looked from her son's sleeping face to her husband's watchful one, and then up at the painted stars on the ceiling. She had spent her life trying to understand the cosmos, its immense and impersonal laws. But the flight, the fall, the fear, and the fight had taught her a more profound truth. The universe wasn't just out there. It was in here. It was the ferocious, unyielding gravity of a mother's love. It was the slow, painful, and beautiful work of two people rebuilding trust. It was the choice to take the energy of a collapsing star, an act of violence and hate, and use it to ignite 1,000 new suns. Here, in the quiet of this room, holding her own small, perfect star, Amelia had found the true center of her universe. And it was brighter than she had ever imagined.